Welcome to the Younger Members Committee Career Information Session number 2, when Michael Quindon talks to Fiona McKeever about managing your career.
Good evening, everyone, and you're all very welcome to this, the second edition of our Younger Members Committee Career Information Session of this autumn. We're delighted to have Fiona McKeever joining us here to speak this evening about the important and probably perhaps overlooked in the legal context area of managing your career. Fiona is a very experienced executive and leadership coach, and has also spent 12 years as a partner with Arthur Cox. She is qualified in, I think, Northern Ireland and in Ireland, and so is very well positioned to be able to provide some very relevant advice and guidance to us on managing your career in the legal context. Fiona left practice in 2018 to focus solely on executive and leadership coaching, and has a wealth of expertise in working with newly appointed managers and leaders and those individuals assigned with new roles and perhaps additional responsibilities. And I'm sure that a lot of you will find what Fiona has to say very relevant, because maybe you've moved recently to a position with more responsibilities or a higher level of management. So I'm very much looking forward to speaking to Fiona. I've no doubt it's going to be a very interesting topic. If there's any questions that anybody wants to ask, you can put them in the chat box and we can either address them during the talk or at the end. Welcome, Fiona, and thanks very much for coming to speak with us this evening. As I said, I'm very looking forward to it. But to start us off, you might give us an overview of your own background. I know you started off as a solicitor and then moved subsequently to the coaching role. So you might just give an overview of that.
Thank you, Michael, and it's great to be back. So thank you for inviting me back. For those of you who joined us last year, I talked about confidence. But for those of you who don't know me, as Michael said, I am an executive and leadership and career coach, and I support people at key career milestones and on certain leadership challenges. But as Michael said, I didn't start out life as a coach. I qualified as a solicitor let's just say in the 90s. I'm not going to put a specific date on it. And I qualified in a large commercial firm in Belfast, and I qualified into commercial real estate. And then subsequently, I was always very interested in European law. So I sought opportunities in that space, and an opportunity arose in Dublin soon after I qualified. So I moved into that area where I spent most of my legal career. So I became a partner in 2007, but even throughout my career to that date, I had an interest in supporting and developing people. So I moved into professional development within Arthur Cox, and then subsequently into coaching. And since January 2019, I've been working with people on a sort of a one-to-one or group coaching basis, helping them with their careers. So I've had some career changes in my own career, and I suppose that gives me some, hopefully credibility to talk about managing your career.
Oh, definitely. Thanks, Fiona. I think you're very much so. I mean, I suppose in the legal world, perhaps we operate, or think we operate in our own silo. So it's great. You're very well, as I said, positioned to be able to provide some guidance for us. I think a lot of us here on listening in will probably have experience of moving from different roles and moving up the chain from, say, intern to trainee, to newly qualified, associate and partner level, and obviously have ambitions to do so. And will be given more responsibility and more management roles. But I suppose just in terms of looking at that and how to manage that and manage your career, how should we be thinking about managing our career, and what does it mean in practice?
Sure. So I think there are three key points that I want to make. And the first is around, I suppose, personal responsibility. career means different things to different people. I'm sure it means something different to people on this call than it might mean to me or perhaps you as well. So it's really important. What was, you might be surrounded by good friends who'll give you advice. You have formal mentors, great colleagues who give you opportunities, open doors for you. It is really important to, you can't really depend on other people to make those career choices for you. So it really is that's my starting point. This is something that each individual needs to take ownership of. The second point is around time. So in order to take ownership of this, of managing your career, you really need to dedicate some time to it. And for some people, that might come naturally. They may always be thinking about what the next step is or what the next objective is. But for many of us, we don't spend, a year might pass and we might not actually have spent much time thinking about our career. So what I really encourage people to do is to make a diary appointment with themselves, in 3 or 4 months' time, and to give themselves 30 minutes, perhaps an hour, to think about what would I like to achieve in the next 12 months? And let that be your compass and your guide. What type of a lawyer do I want to be? And that will help you focus on the next 12 months. So again, that area of focus might be different for different people. So if you're a newly qualified, you may be focused on your technical skills. You might be developing, you might need to focus on really getting to grips with the legislation, the rules of court, how to write more effectively, how to present. But if you're slightly more senior, you might be thinking, I really want to work with certain types of clients. I really want to, work with tech companies or, startups. So if that's my objective, then let that be my compass for my sort of my development over the next 12 months. And for others, people might want to get more involved in the running of the business or the running of the operations. And that might be around legal technology or indeed, taking more of responsibility in relation to the training and development of their team. And these are relevant whether you are, in-house, whether you're a private practitioner, whether you're a solicitor in a regulated body. It's about time, thinking about, giving yourself some dedicated time to think about what do I want to be focusing on in the next year, then breaking that down into 2 or 3 specific objectives, and then building in a review so that you can incrementally, I suppose, assess, what progress you've made. And that then helps you, as I said, it helps you make incremental progress rather than being faced maybe with a big cliff edge career decision. Do I stay and become a partner? Do I stay or go in-house? If you're making incremental decisions, then the big decision actually is never as big as it or as scary as it might be. And the final point I want to make about managing your career is never lose sight of those areas of interest that might be peripheral to your core job, but they might have been things that you were interested in college or at the start of your career, because by nurturing that interest, you stay connected with different types of people who have different objectives and they've access to different information and ways of doing things. And I think it helps you keep balanced. I do work with a number of lawyers at a senior stage, and they say, I've become so narrow and so focused in a particular area. I don't really know what's going on, outside my narrow focus. And that can lead to, feelings of being bored or indeed feelings of dissatisfaction. So those are the 3 sort of big points I would make: personal responsibility, giving yourself specific time to focus on this, and then please maintain an interest in other areas so that you don't become one-dimensional or potentially dissatisfied in the future.
That's very interesting and very practical as well. And I think, I certainly am guilty of not setting that time down. I not speaking of probably cliff edges. The cliff edge for me is my appraisal, my once a year appraisal. About 5 minutes before I go into the office, I'm like, oh God, what should I say? What do I want to do? So I think setting aside or putting in a diary entry, I'm going to spend an hour here on this. This is for me to reflect on it. I think it's a very useful idea as well to diary review. And even if I sat down for an hour, I think the importance of that review as well. Okay, what have I done, or where have I gone to achieve that? That's a very useful thing. And your point there about maintaining interest outside of your immediate, I suppose, speciality hits home as well with me in particular. I suppose I do have had experience in kind of helping out in different, say, voluntary bodies or even a charity. And I found that you're dead right. It helps to kind of broaden your mind and keeps you kind of, I suppose, your interest levels high in various different things, and keeps your probably your motivation levels high in your job as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that's all very interesting. And I think as part of that review, I think you've spoken about auditing skills and auditing your knowledge and your interests as well. I suppose just in terms of practical terms, how do you go about that, or what's involved in that?
Yeah, so it comes back to that question, what am I hoping to achieve over the next couple of, the next 12 months? And once you're clear about that objective, you can then break it down into, well, what skills do I need to be really good at to make that, to meet that goal? What do I need to know, at a really deep level in order to, meet that objective? And then you look at, well, what am I good at now? What skills have I already developed? And then do that gap analysis. This is so clarity around where you want to go, and then assessing, I suppose, the starting point. So again, that would be a general point I would make. Of course, sometimes people are unclear, what skills may be required at the next level, or if they have a specific objective, or what skills do I really need in that area. And it gets a little bit tricky because we're no longer in a sort of environment where people have a linear career. So previously, a career would have started here and then would have gone diagonally to a very senior role, so trainee, to partner, general counsel. But that is less prevalent now, not only in law, but in other areas as well. And it's actually known as the squiggly career. And that's simply where you might go up a bit, you might go, you might develop expertise in a different area, take on a management role, perhaps take a career break, pause, go on sabbatical for a while, and then you might dip a bit and then go up again. So I think it's just worth bearing that in mind, that careers are no longer as linear as they used to be. But notwithstanding that, it's useful to think about skills in three different sort of buckets. So there's the subject matter expert bucket, there's the manager bucket, and then there's the leadership bucket. So the subject matter expertise is really at the start of your career. Again, it's thinking about, well, what areas of law do I need to be expert in? Am I skilled at advocacy, if that's a particular need for me? Am I skilled at presentation and written skills? So the subject matter expert area is very much about delivering the job, delivering the task. When you think about the manager role, that's more about managing how the task is delivered. So you're moving there into managing people, and you're thinking about managing projects, organizing resources to meet a specific need. So there's less of you delivering the task and more of you corralling other people to make the task happen. And that's, you'd be thinking about things like delegation and feedback, and we can talk about that in a little bit more detail if you want.
Yeah.
And as planning and organizing projects as well. And then the third bucket is around leadership. And leadership is one of those areas which, there's an awful lot of talk about it, particularly currently, but there's a lot of focus on simply leadership style. So perhaps compassionate leadership, inclusive leadership, authentic leadership. And I certainly don't want to diminish the importance of compassion or inclusion or authenticity, but sometimes the focus on the style takes away from actually the core of leadership, which is around being clear about the task and the results, and mobilizing a team to deliver on those tasks, and motivating and developing individuals within those teams. So even if those, when you're thinking about what skills you might need to develop, just think about them in those sort of, even those three large areas. Am I developing subject matter expertise skills?
Yeah.
Do I need to develop manager skills, or do I need to develop leadership skills?
Yeah, that's very interesting. And like, I think certainly in my experience anyway, maybe it's similar for a lot of people. When you think of studying law or doing law, practicing law, you probably think of the first subject matter one where you're as I say, you're gaining your knowledge base or expanding your knowledge base in a particular area. There's probably less, or at least in your early days, less of an emphasis on management and the leadership skills, which is obviously not, I mean, it's not ideal. Obviously, you will end up in those roles. So in terms of management, and one of the things that you alluded to it there, I'm probably not great at, is being able to delegate and trusting other people to delegate. How do you see that, be able to develop those skills?
So delegation and giving feedback are critical skills for lawyers, and actually all professionals as well. For many reasons. As you become more experienced, as your caseload grows, you cannot continue to do every aspect of every particular job or task. So no, I have a lot of sympathy for people who are working in very small practice areas where they may not have a secretary or a trainee or a paralegal to support them. Or even if they're a senior associate, they may not have a junior associate to work with them. So, I do want to acknowledge that upfront, that if that's the position you're in, I appreciate it's quite difficult. Having said that, I probably have heard every single excuse why a lawyer is not, it does not delegate, and this comes up a lot in coaching. It takes too long. I don't have time to delegate. It's quicker to do it myself. When I delegate, I get a poor quality product. I don't get back what I'm looking for. So those are the excuses. I think what's really important for people to remember is, if you continue to do the work that you did when you were a newly qualified, or when you were 1 year qualified or 2 years qualified, now you're 7, 8, 9, 10, there's a risk that you get stuck. There's a risk that you become so overwhelmed with your caseload that you get very stressed because you cannot actually deliver all of this. There's a risk also that you actually undermine your own professional reputation, because you may start to be perceived by your colleagues, your boss, or your other stakeholders as someone who only can do X. That person's very good at research, or that person's very good on the technical stuff, but they're not so good on leading big projects. So by continuing to do the same work, as I said, you might actually undermine how people perceive you. Yeah. So those are the risks that I think you face. And without turning this into sort of a training 101 in delegation, I think the key things are to be clear, to actually think about, what aspect of this job can I give to somebody else? And to actively seek that, rather than automatically thinking, oh, I can't do that, I can't delegate it. The second thing is, am I clear what I am asking the other person to do? Have I given enough information about the task, but also have I given enough clarity about the results that I want? So this is the typical, do I want a 15-page opinion with with footnotes beautifully researched, or do I want 3 bullet points? Do I want a rough and ready draft advice to a client, or do I want something that is ready to go? So just being clear about your expectations, and then always building in time for a review, or a time to give some feedback on the quality of the work. This is what you did well, and this is what you did not do well, or could do better, so that you're continuing to develop your team and motivate them. So those are the key things around delegation and feedback.
Yeah, that's great. That's something I'm definitely going to be taking on board, because it's something I really feel like I need to work on. And in fact, that's one thing in terms of secretary or trainees that I potentially need to work on, as well as that review side of it, in terms of giving the feedback after delegation, so that that person can improve. And I suppose then the next rung up, and you alluded to it earlier, in terms of leadership skills. And I suppose people talk about being a born leader, and that person over there, he's a born leader. Is it the case that it's something innate, or is it something you can actually develop throughout your career?
Yeah, so I absolutely believe that leadership is something that you can absolutely develop. Leadership is a combination of qualities. It's a combination of personality, yes, but it's also a function of the context and the situation as well. So leadership is leadership can be trained and developed rather than people being sort of born with leadership skills.
Mm.
And I think sometimes, again, training and development interventions, sometimes can be misdirected because they focus perhaps solely on personality or qualities, rather than really coming down to, so what is leadership? And again, the definition that I come back to is there are three elements of leadership. It's about achieving a task or an objective through the work of a team and developing and motivating individuals who can contribute to that team and that objective. And when you think about it in those terms, those are all areas in which you can actually develop. And those are the three areas, sort of the three broad areas of what is leadership. What sits below that are the skills which support those three areas. And those are things like defining the task. So again, a lot of leadership training is very focused on motivation, and motivation is absolutely one of the skills. But if a leader cannot define the task or cannot plan the project, there's nothing more demotivating than working with somebody who's totally disorganized and totally is not clear about what role they want you to play. So leadership has to be a combination of defining the task, planning the task, briefing people, this is your role, this is why we're doing this, uh, controlling, and when I mean control, I mean making sure that there are the correct processes and systems in place, making sure things are done on time and to the right standard, the right quality. And a lot of organizations may shy away from difficult performance management conversations or difficult feedback conversations, but that is an element of it is an element of leadership. And then setting an example, that a leader sets the tone for the organization as well. So that's probably where the sort of the qualities come in, and the values. So there are sort of 8 key areas of leadership, which I think, I mean, again, can't sort of go into them into a huge amount of detail, but I think a lot of leadership is often focused on, the individual or the task. And I think more focus could be paid to how do we develop the team. So that's where I think people who are in more senior positions should be really thinking about, who is my team, who needs to be in my team, how do I motivate them, how do I organize them?
Right. That's very interesting. We've a couple of questions coming through, and I suppose the first question is a good link from what the leadership qualities and skills you're just speaking about, because during the pandemic, there's obviously been a massive need for leadership within organizations, but and it's obviously created a lot of challenges. But one of the questions is, have you any advice for managing our careers as we come out of the pandemic? Lack of visibility, I assume, in the office over the last 18 months has been an issue for many young solicitors. And a follow-on to that is do you recommend mentoring of younger solicitors? I suppose in terms of managing that, how do you think that someone coming back in, having that lack of visibility, can manage it going forward?
So it's a very important point, and thank you for raising it. I think the first thing I would say is, I don't want people to feel either discouraged or to be sort of berating themselves for losing visibility over the pandemic, or perhaps focusing on the health of their family, homeschooling, and quite frankly, staying alive and getting the job done. So I think there's a risk that we become very we punish ourselves perhaps for not moving our careers on as quickly as we might otherwise have liked, or we're not as visible. So I would encourage a little bit of self-compassion there. That's the first point. The second point is, even just being self-aware enough to know that perhaps your visibility has dropped in some way is then a good trigger to think about, well, what is my campaign? And when I say campaign, it's simply thinking about, are there 2 or 3 partners or 2 or 3 key players in my career who perhaps I haven't had coffee with over 18 months? Do I know what's going on in the organization? Do I know where the business is going or my practice area is going? So, taking that step just to reconnect with 2 or 3 people in an informal way, and I appreciate, not everybody will be going back to the office, and maybe we'll be spending less time in the office than we had anticipated. But don't let those announcements stop you from thinking about who are the 2 or 3 people I should be speaking to, and suggesting a face-to-face coffee if that's possible. But if not, suggesting also, can we just catch up on Zoom just for 20 minutes, where we actually don't talk about the transaction, we don't talk about the client work, we simply, I just really like to hear about what's going on in the business, and to refresh that partner's memory perhaps about my own career ambitions. So don't be shy, but don't let the continuing phase of the pandemic hold you back at this stage.
Yeah, that's very good advice, and I think I'd echo that in terms of that Zoom coffee, even if it can't happen in person. I think it's a great way of reconnecting. We probably have just time for 1 or maybe 2 more questions. And another question that's come in is, do you recommend leadership skills training even at the very early stages of a career?
So I absolutely encourage skills development training at every stage in your career. I think what I would be doing is, rather than simply calling it generic leadership, is really focusing on we have a group of solicitors at a particular stage. What skills and knowledge do they need for the next step? And if that's delegation and feedback skills, and I know that sometimes that can feel a little bit sort of not very exciting and not very innovative, but if those are perhaps the skills that are required to get that are required at the next level, presentation skills, that's not always considered a leadership skill per se, but the way you present, the way you interact, the way you influence your clients, your stakeholders, your teams, that is critical. So I would move away from calling it simply leadership training skills, but actually really thinking about what are the roles that we are trying to train to, and then breaking it down to specific skills, rather than simply this is a management skills program or a leadership skills program. But absolutely, people should be thinking about these management skills, people skills at a much earlier stage than they currently are.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think it's definitely something I think we'll probably all need to take on board, is looking at the different ways where we can develop our skills at all stages of our career. We've a couple of questions coming in, still coming in, and some great responses and feedback. People are really delighted, Fiona, but I think we're just about just after 7:30 now, so we're just about running out of time. So I think it's probably best to leave it on that note and positive note. And I just want to thank you, Fiona, again for coming in. It's been, for me anyway, very it's made me think about and reflect on my own, I suppose, situation and how to manage my career and where to go from here, and to make time for myself in terms of managing and where I want to go, which I think will be very useful. And no doubt everyone on this call will have something to take away from it. So thanks very much, Fiona.
Well, thank you for having me, and you have emphasized the key point about giving yourself some time, and to believe that this is not indulgent to think about your career in this way. This is about career and work takes up a huge amount of our time, so you just you owe it to yourself to be sort of purposeful and focused. So if that's the one thing people take away, is just to spend a bit of dedicated time. I think that's a good takeaway.
Great way to finish on that, and thanks very much, Fiona, again.
Thank you,
and for joining in.
Thanks very much, Michael. Good evening, everybody. See you soon.
Talk to you soon. Stay safe.
Bye.
Bye.